Penny sat at the corner cafe with Agatha, her closest confidant. Over steaming bowls of soup and crusty bread, their conversation meandered from their work lives. Penny, a partner at a law firm, and Agatha, a nurse for a local doctor, to the inevitable topic of their husbands. Agatha beamed as she shared her husband's latest triumph. He'd just purchased the garage where he had worked for years. "He's such a talented mechanic," she said. "Things are finally looking up for him." Penny, however, wore a look of frustration. "Neil's been insufferable lately," she admitted. "All he does is gripe about his secretary. Just the other night, he asked why she doesn't understand that a woman's role is to serve a man. Can you believe that? I'm so tired of his sexist attitude. Sometimes I wish he could experience the world through a woman's eyes. Maybe then he'd understand." Agatha leaned in conspiratorially, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You know, there might be a way to teach him a lesson, something unconventional but effective." Penny raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" "Well," Agatha said, glancing around as if someone might overhear, "at the clinic, we've got these samples of a new drug. It's experimental, meant to make a person highly suggestible for a short time. Just one drop, and they'll follow whatever instructions you give them. The doctor told me to discard it since he'd never prescribe it, but I still have the samples and the antidote too, just in case." Penny was skeptical but intrigued. "Even if I went along with this, what would I do to make him understand how hard it is to be a woman?" Agatha grinned mischievously. "Let him walk in your shoes for a day, literally. Has he ever scrubbed a floor on his hands and knees? Spent hours in high heels? Trust me, a taste of womanhood might open his eyes." After a moment's hesitation, Penny relented. "Fine, bring it over. A little embarrassment might do him some good." That evening during dinner, Neil launched into yet another rant. "My secretary couldn't even get my coffee right today," he complained. "She put sugar in it. How hard is it to remember I take it black? She's as useless as a screen door on a submarine." Before Penny could respond, the doorbell rang. It was Agatha, holding 2 small bottles of liquid. She handed them over with clear instructions. "The main one makes him compliant for about 18 hours, but he'll only respond to the first person who speaks to him after he takes it. The antidote will reverse the effects instantly if needed." Penny set the bottles on the kitchen counter and returned to the table. As they finished eating, she noticed Neil's glass of milk was empty. Smiling to herself, she refilled it, discreetly adding a single drop of the drug. When she set it in front of him, he frowned. "I didn't want a full glass," he said, but he drank it anyway. Penny seized the moment. "You can finish it," she said softly. Neil complied, draining the glass. "Let's do the dishes together," she suggested, testing the waters. To her surprise, he agreed, something he'd never done before. She fetched a lacy apron from the pantry. "Here, put this on to keep your shirt clean." Neil tied the apron around his waist without protest. Emboldened, Penny added, "You know, there's a blouse in the closet with lace just like that. Why not change into it so you match?" 5 minutes later, he returned wearing the blouse, the apron still tied neatly in place. Together, they tackled the dishes, and when they were done, Penny couldn't resist one last push. "Lipstick would really bring out the lace detail," she said playfully. By the time Neil joined her in the living room, his lips were painted a vivid crimson. Penny smirked and poured them both a drink, slipping a drop of the antidote into his glass. As he sipped, she watched the awareness creep back into his expression. "That's a pretty blouse you've got on," she teased. Neil glanced down and blushed furiously. He remembered putting it on but couldn't fathom why. Embarrassed, he started to rise, but Penny stopped him. "You might as well leave it on until bed. I've already seen you in it." Resigned, he nodded, muttering something under his breath. Penny hid her smile behind her glass, savoring the small victory. The next morning, Penny dove into her work, her characteristic bursts of productivity leaving her caught up by lunchtime. With her tasks squared away, she treated herself to a relaxed midday meal. As she sipped her coffee, her thoughts wandered back to Neil and the amusing possibilities that lay before her. Maybe she'd have him clean the living room in a dress, she mused, before dismissing the idea as too mundane. Then, An image of him polishing silver while wearing a lacy nightgown made her laugh softly to herself. The possibilities, she realized, were endless. Deciding to play it by ear, she resolved to see where the day might lead. Meanwhile, at work, Neil found himself distracted. He couldn't shake the strange memory of wearing a woman's blouse the night before. Why had he done it? The memory was fuzzy, yet the sensation of the soft fabric lingered, unsettlingly pleasant. The whole episode troubled him, leaving him distracted and introspective. By 3 o'clock, Penny had decided her day at the office was done. With time to spare, she headed out to do some shopping, eager to find herself a new dress. At one of the town's more upscale women's boutiques, she was drawn in by a sale on lingerie. Buy one, get one free. Initially, she thought about picking up a few pieces for herself, but an idea sparked why not get some for Neil. Her cart quickly filled with delicate, lacy panties adorned with bows and ruffles, bright-colored satin bras, and even some long-line styles that hooked in the front for ease of use. At the stocking display, she decided thigh-high stockings were a must and selected every pattern available. Adding camisoles in dark, lace-trimmed fabrics, and a trio of full slips to her haul, Penny paused, chuckling to herself. With all this lingerie, she reasoned, he'd need dresses to match. By the time she had 6 dresses in her cart, Penny found herself frozen, gripping the handle and staring blankly. Did she really want to feminize Neil? Was she going too far? A zealous girl's cheerful voice jolted her from her thoughts. "Looks like you're making the most of our sale," the girl remarked, then casually mentioned they had corsets on discount as well. Before Penny knew it, she was picking out 2 maximum control corsets. At checkout, the sheer volume of her purchase's 5 large bags astonished her. Loading them into her car, she noticed an adult store next door. Out of curiosity, she stepped inside. The bondage gear and chastity belts didn't interest her, though she briefly entertained the idea of a chastity device before dismissing it as unnecessary. In the nightwear section, however, a sheer, ultra-feminine nightgown with lace and ruffles caught her eye. She added it to her haul. Then came the shoes' 6-inch heels with locking straps. While the locks seemed excessive, they were the only option available, so she chose 2 pairs. The total cost was shocking, but Penny felt a mischievous thrill as she drove home. Once there, she unpacked her purchases, marveling at the sheer variety. She wasn't sure she'd use everything but decided to be prepared for anything. Selecting a full ensemble, she laid it out on the bed, including the heels. Looking at them, she doubted Neil could manage more than a shuffle in the towering stilettos. When Neil arrived home, Penny greeted him with a drink, which he downed gratefully. Calmly, she suggested he change into the clothes laid out for him. Without hesitation, he disappeared into the bedroom, returning minutes later. The transformation was breathtaking and hilarious. Neil wore a pink dress trimmed in lace, paired with black floral pattern stockings and the impossibly high heels. His steps were tiny, almost tentative, and Penny couldn't help but notice how the stuffed bra cups exaggerated his chest in a way that was both comical and absurd. She suggested he complete the look with makeup, and off he went to the bathroom. When he returned, his eyelids shimmered with eyeshadow, his lips bore a rosy hue, and the faint scent of perfume trailed behind him. They ate supper in silence, though Penny could barely contain her amusement. Afterward, she proposed they do the dishes together, handing him the apron. He donned it without question and helped dry the plates. Delighted by his cooperation, she pushed a little further. "Why don't you polish the dining room furniture next?" she suggested. Neil immediately fetched the furniture polish and a rag, diligently working on the table. Penny settled into the living room with the evening paper, glancing occasionally toward the dining room, where her husband, dressed to the nines in lace and satin, worked as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Smiling to herself, she thought, what an interesting day this has turned out to be. Penny glanced at Neil a few times as he diligently polished the dining chairs. Despite the ridiculous outfit, he worked with a surprising focus, and the results were impeccable. As he began the final chair, she handed him a drink spiked with the antidote. Neil took a sip, then another, and soon drained the glass. A moment later, he shook his head as if clearing cobwebs, nearly toppling over in the unfamiliar heels. Penny steadied him with a calm voice. "Finish that last chair," she said. "You've done such a great job on the rest of the furniture." Neil looked at her, confused. He glanced down at his outfit, the lacy pink dress, the stockings, the towering heels, and the stuffed bra. He remembered putting them on, but had no idea why. Bewildered, he muttered, "I don't know what's happening. How did I end up in this dress? And these heels? What's going on here?" Penny met his panicked gaze with a steady one. "Tell me the truth. How does the dress feel? Do you enjoy wearing sexy heels? Is the bra too tight?" Neil's face turned beet red. "Stop kidding around. Just tell me what's going on. Am I losing my mind or what?" Penny set her paper aside, her tone firm. "I'll tell you, but you better listen carefully. I'm only going to explain this once. Are you ready to hear the truth?" "Yes, yes. Just tell me," Neil practically shouted, his voice tinged with desperation. Penny took a deep breath and began. "I've had enough of your constant, belittling remarks about women, especially your secretary, Evelyn. She's a hard-working woman, and you've been making her life miserable with your insults and unfair criticism. Your sexist attitude is unacceptable, and I decided it's time for you to understand what it's like to walk in a woman's shoes, literally and figuratively." Neil stared at her, his expression a mix of shock and disbelief, but Penny pressed on. "You see, I have control over you now, and you have a choice to make. You can follow my suggestions willingly, without argument, or I'll use the means I have to enforce my lessons. And believe me, I can make it much worse. How would you feel if I took you on a 3-mile drive, dropped you off in the middle of nowhere, and released my control while you're still dressed like this? Imagine walking home in a dress and heels for everyone to see." Neil's face darkened with anger. "Why can't you just let me be myself? Why do you need to control me?" Penny didn't flinch. "Because I'm trying to make you a better person. You need to learn empathy, Neil. If you keep resisting, don't be surprised if you find yourself at work one day dressed just like this. Is that what you want?" His voice rose, trembling with frustration. "Why should I do everything you say? Why can't I have my say in this?" Penny's gaze hardened. "Because this isn't about control for control's sake. It's about teaching you a lesson. If you agree to listen to me, to truly understand what women endure, you won't have to experience these surprises again. But if you keep fighting me, the surprises will only get worse." Neil's fists clenched at his sides. "I'll never agree to this madness. You're out of your mind. I need a drink." Penny stood. "I'll get one for you." She moved to the kitchen, mixing the drink and adding another drop of the control serum. Returning with a glass, she handed it to him, watching as his defiance softened with every sip. Later that night, when it was time for bed, Penny suggested he wear the new nightgown she had picked out. As Neil began undressing, she added, "Why don't you keep the bra and panties on? That way, you won't have to put them on in the morning." Her tone was casual, almost dismissive, as though her suggestion were the most natural thing in the world. Under her influence, Neil complied, slipping into the lacy nightwear and climbing into bed without complaint. Penny settled in beside him, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. As she turned off the light, she thought to herself, maybe, just maybe, this will finally get through to him. The next morning, Penny smiled as she casually suggested Neil wear thigh-high stockings and a camisole to match his bra and panties. Under her subtle influence, he complied, though his expression shifted when she told him to wipe off his lipstick and eyeshadow before heading to work. Despite the oddity, Neil left the house like it was any other day. At work, everything seemed normal at first, but as the hours passed, Neil became increasingly aware of the tightness of the bra against his chest. The sensation of the camisole's lace brushing his skin, combined with the elastic of the thigh-highs clinging to his legs, was impossible to ignore. Finally, unable to concentrate, he slipped into the bathroom, locking himself in a stall. Slowly, he unbuttoned his shirt and gasped as the lacy edge of the camisole came into view. The silky fabric of the panties and the delicate pattern of the stockings beneath his pants left no doubt. He was fully dressed in women's lingerie. Flushed with embarrassment, Neil left the bathroom, feeling as though everyone he passed could see straight through his clothes. By the time he reached his office, his face was hot with shame and frustration. He considered calling Penny to demand an explanation but hesitated. Her cryptic warnings about control and keywords echoed in his mind, and he worried about what she might do if provoked. Instead, he decided to redirect his focus and called in his secretary, Evelyn. When Evelyn entered, notebook in hand, ready for dictation, Neil leaned forward and said, "Lately, you've been making some mistakes. I know you're capable, so what's been going on? Do you know why this is happening?" Evelyn hesitated, meeting his gaze with a mix of vulnerability and honesty. "I know my performance hasn't been great," she admitted. "The truth is, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and the treatments are taking a toll on him. I've been spending every evening at his house, helping him until he goes to bed. He's lost so much weight, and I don't even know if the treatments are working. I'm exhausted, Mr. Saunders. I'm so sorry my work has slipped." Neil's demeanor softened immediately. "I had no idea, Evelyn. I'm sorry for assuming the worst. I blamed your mistakes on incompetence when I should have just asked. You're a bright, hard-working woman, and I can see you're doing your best under tough circumstances. If you need time off to care for your father, just let me know. I'll do whatever I can to support you." Evelyn's eyes filled with gratitude, but a flicker of curiosity crossed her face. "Can I ask you something personal, Mr. Saunders? I promise I don't mean any offense." "Go ahead," he replied cautiously. "Well," she began hesitantly, "it looks like there's lace showing through your shirt. Are you wearing a camisole or something?" Neil froze, unsure how to respond. Finally, he sighed. "I won't lie to you. My wife doesn't like my attitude toward women, and she's somehow found a way to influence what I wear. I can't explain how she's doing it, but lately I found myself dressed in women's clothes. I remember putting them on, but not why. It's complicated." Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. "To be honest, I've overheard some of your remarks about women, and I didn't care for them. But I figured you didn't know any better. What do you think your wife's endgame is?" "I have no idea," Neil admitted. "She once said she could send me to work in a dress if she wanted. I'm afraid of what she might do next. I've been trying to get her to stop, but it's entirely up to her." Evelyn smirked. "Have you considered telling her you enjoy wearing dresses? Maybe she'd back off if she thought you liked it." Neil snorted, half amused, half horrified. "If I told her that, she'd probably keep me in dresses full time. That wouldn't surprise me at all." Evelyn chuckled. "Well, who knows? You might actually look good in a dress with a little makeup to match." "Don't even joke about that," Neil groaned. "I wouldn't know what to do if I showed up here in a dress." Evelyn leaned back, a mischievous glint in her eye. "You do exactly what you're doing now, just carry on, like it's the most natural thing in the world." Her playful tone made Neil laugh despite himself, though the thought lingered as he returned to his desk. The strange, surreal situation with Penny was clearly far from over. Neil sighed heavily, the conversation with Evelyn replaying in his mind as he left work. Her understanding had been surprising, but her teasing suggestion that he might look good in a dress had unsettled him. "No way could I tell Penny I liked any part of this," he thought. That would only encourage her, and he knew how relentless she could be. By the time he got home, his simmering frustration had boiled over. As he walked through the door, Penny greeted him with a wide, almost triumphant smile, which only fueled his anger. "Why did you send me to work in women's underwear?" he snapped. "That's the most idiotic, humiliating thing you've ever done." Penny remained calm, handing him a drink. "Sit down," she said. "I'll explain." Reluctantly, he obeyed, still fuming. Penny sat opposite him, her expression unwavering. "I told you," she began, "I control you. You spent so much time dismissing women, treating them as if they're less than you. I thought you'd come home today and maybe reflect on how a woman outsmarted you. Instead, you march in here, throwing a tantrum over underwear. Maybe tomorrow I will send you to work in a dress. Perhaps that will open your eyes to perspectives beyond your narrow, outdated views. Don't even think about it. Neil shot back, his voice rising. If you're as smart as you claim to be, you should find a better way to change my mind without humiliating me. Penny's composure didn't waver. And don't you think it's humiliating for me, as a woman, to hear you constantly make derogatory remarks about women? Your behavior reflects poorly on you, not just me. You don't understand, Neil argued. You don't see the idiocy I deal with every day. Women do stupid things all the time. Just open your eyes. Penny's expression hardened. I can see this is going to take more effort than I thought. If you won't change willingly, then you'll learn the hard way. Let me get you another drink. She disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a fresh drink laced with a single drop of the serum. Neil drank it without suspicion, his frustration momentarily dulled. When the glass was nearly empty, Penny suggested he change into the outfit she'd laid out on the bed. Compelled by her influence, he complied. When Neil returned, Penny took in the sight with a mix of amusement and satisfaction. He was wearing a sleek red dress with a tight, straight skirt that emphasized every movement. The hemlines stopped just above his red heels, which added 6 inches to his height. Despite the towering stilettos, he managed to walk with surprising steadiness. Penny smiled. You look great. Go ahead and put on your makeup. Minutes later, Neil emerged again, his face lightly dusted with foundation, lipstick perfectly applied, and his eyeshadow complementing the red dress. Penny studied him critically. Let's go shopping, she announced. Neil didn't argue as they drove to a wig shop. Inside, Penny handed him a small glass of water mixed with the antidote. As he regained his awareness, she addressed him directly. I'm going to let you choose your wig. You can pick the style and color, or I'll choose for you and you'll have to wear it, like it or not. What's it going to be? Neil hesitated, realizing the seriousness of her tone. Finally, he selected a platinum blonde wig, medium length, with a cascade of curls. Penny raised an eyebrow, surprised by the choice. She had expected him to opt for something more understated. She also picked out a red jeweled hair clip, which she fastened into the wig once he was wearing it. As they left the shop, Neil's new look drew glances from passers-by. Penny wasn't done yet. We need to eat, she said, pulling into the parking lot of a supper club. Neil balked. I can't go in there like this. Of course you can, Penny countered smoothly. You need to eat, and you'll be fine. Besides, you look great. Come on. Reluctantly, Neil followed her into the restaurant, his heels clicking against the pavement. Inside, the low hum of conversation and clinking silverware filled the air. He felt every set of eyes on him, though most people were too engrossed in their own meals to notice. Penny acted as though everything was perfectly normal, leading him to a table and smiling warmly at the waiter. As Neil sat down, he thought about Evelyn's words. Maybe Penny was teaching him a lesson, but how much farther was she willing to go? And more importantly, how much could he endure? As they settled into their meal, Neil's unease lingered, though Penny seemed to be thoroughly enjoying herself. At one point, Neil excused himself to use the restroom. He hesitated outside the women's restroom, his pulse racing, before finally pushing the door open. The room was thankfully empty. Once inside, he quickly entered a stall, relieved to have some privacy. As he finished up, he heard the sound of the door opening and someone entering the stall next to his. Feeling a surge of panic, he exited his stall quickly. Glancing himself in the mirror, he noticed his lipstick had faded slightly. With a sigh, he dug into the purse Penny had insisted he carry and began applying a fresh coat. Just as he finished, the other woman emerged from her stall, glanced at him briefly, washed her hands, and left without comment. He exhaled in relief, washed his hands, and headed back to the table. On his way, a man brushed past him and pinched his rear. Startled, Neil let out a yelp and turned to glare at the offender, who simply winked before walking away. Mortified, Neil quickened his pace back to the table. When he recounted the incident to Penny, she burst into laughter. Oh my, Neil, or should I say Cecil, you've really made an impression tonight. This isn't funny, Neil snapped, his face flushed. Some man just pinched me. Still chuckling, Penny replied, "Well, now you know what it's like for women. Welcome to our world." As they continued eating, a young man approached their table. He made polite conversation with Penny, clearly interested in her companion. When he asked about Neil, Penny, without missing a beat, said, "I just lost my husband." The young man quickly retreated, leaving Neil glaring at Penny. "Just lost my husband," he echoed, incredulous. They both broke into laughter, though Neil's was more of a begrudging chuckle. "It just slipped out," Penny said, grinning. "Though it looks like you've got an admirer. Would you rather go home with him?" "Don't even joke about that," Neil retorted. "You may have me in a dress, but I'm not interested in men at all." I know," Penny said, still smiling. "I'm just teasing you. But it is funny that you're drawing more attention than I am tonight. Must be the dress. Red is a sexy color, you know." "Is that why you put me in it?" Neil asked, narrowing his eyes. "Not at all," Penny replied smoothly. "It's just a good evening dress. Classy and appropriate for going out." Neil frowned, his frustration simmering again. "Speaking of dresses, you don't seriously expect me to wear all those dresses you hung in my closet, do you?" "Oh, I think you'll wear them all eventually," Penny said, her tone nonchalant. "I picked a range of styles, one for any occasion, and if we need more, we can always go shopping again." Neil's voice rose slightly. "How long do you plan to keep this up? This isn't right, and you know it." Penny's eyes gleamed with amusement. "Oh, it feels perfectly right to me. And to be honest, I'm enjoying this. For once, I'm the one in charge, and it's refreshing. You brought this on yourself with your attitude." "There's nothing wrong with my attitude," Neil insists. "Just because we don't agree on something doesn't mean you get to take over. What's next? What else can you possibly do to me?" Penny paused, her lips curling into a playful smile. "Well," she said, "we can't keep calling you Neil when you're dressed like this. It's not fitting. What about Thomasina?" No, that doesn't work. How about Cecil?" "Yes, Cecil has a nice ring to it." Neil groaned. "Why would I want a feminine name in the first place? You're stupider than I thought." Penny's expression hardened. "Watch it. If you don't like Cecil, I can come up with something else. But if you call me stupid again, you might find yourself walking home tonight instead of riding with me." "You're not serious," Neil said, his voice faltering. "Oh, I'm completely serious," Penny replied, her tone icy. "It's about 4 miles home. Think about that before you open your mouth again. And if you give me any more attitude tonight, I guarantee you'll be going to work tomorrow in a dress. You've been warned." Neil fell silent, his anger simmering under a layer of growing dread. Penny's sharp wit and newfound authority left him unsure of how to respond and increasingly aware that his situation was entirely out of his control. Penny glanced at Neil as he stomped into the kitchen wearing his usual men's attire, his expression dark with defiance. She sipped her coffee calmly and raised an eyebrow. "Did you forget, Neil? You're supposed to be wearing the black pinstriped suit today." He shot her a glare, his voice sharp. "I told you I'm not wearing it. I'm done with this nonsense, Penny." She smiled faintly, unbothered by his tone. "I see you've made your decision, but let me remind you, I'm not bluffing. If you think I'll let this slide, you're sorely mistaken." Neil crossed his arms, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. "You've gone too far, Penny. Forcing me to walk home last night, dressing me up like some kind of doll, it's humiliating. I'm putting my foot down. This stops now." Penny leaned back in her chair, studying him with a mix of amusement and authority. "Humiliation, Neil? Or a taste of what women endure every day? Last night wasn't just about the dress or the heels, it was about perspective. But clearly, you still don't get it. That attitude of yours hasn't changed one bit." Neil sighed, trying to keep his frustration in check. "If this is about making me understand something, you've made your point. I get it. But it's not going to work, Penny. I'm not wearing a dress to work." Her smile widened ever so slightly. "We'll see about that." The tension lingered as Neil finished his breakfast, Penny's calm demeanor only fueling his irritation. He stormed out of the kitchen and into the bathroom to get ready for the day, confident that he'd reclaimed some sense of normalcy. But as he reached for his shirt in the closet, he found his entire wardrobe had been replaced. Hanging where his suits and ties once were rows of dresses, blouses, and skirts. On the shelf above, instead of his usual shoes, he saw neatly arranged pairs of heels in various colors and styles. His jaw clenched as he realized Penny had outmaneuvered him yet again. He stomped back to the kitchen, holding one of the dresses up like evidence in a trial. "Where are my clothes, Penny? What the hell is this?" She looked up from her coffee, feigning innocence. "Oh, I thought you'd appreciate a more curated wardrobe. If you want your old clothes back, maybe you should reconsider that pinstriped suit." Neil stared at her, exasperated. "This is ridiculous. You can't just take away all my clothes." Penny's tone shifted, firm and resolute. "I can, and I have. If you want to keep testing me, Neil, go ahead. But I warned you this doesn't end until you learn to respect women, and that includes me." His shoulders sagged slightly as he realized he was cornered. He could argue all day, but Penny was clearly one step ahead of him. She wasn't just making a point. She was determined to see it through. Finally, he sighed in resignation. "Fine. I'll wear the stupid dress. But this isn't over, Penny." She smiled, her victory clear. "Oh, I know it's not. But at least you're learning, even if it's the hard way. Now hurry up, or you'll be late for work." Neil trudged back to the closet, muttering under his breath as he pulled out the black pinstriped suit dress. As he slipped it on, the fabric clung to his frame in a way that was both foreign and unsettling. The accompanying heels felt like a cruel joke, but he stepped into them nonetheless, knowing Penny wouldn't let him leave the house otherwise. When he returned to the kitchen, fully dressed, Penny clapped her hands together lightly. "You look sharp, Cecil. Now, let's hope today is a productive one for your work and your attitude." Neil grumbled as he grabbed his bag, his face a mixture of humiliation and defiance. As he stepped out the door, Penny called after him, her voice light but firm. "Remember, Neil, how you handle today will shape what happens next." He didn't respond, but her words echoed in his mind as he headed to the car. For the first time, he felt the weight of her control and the growing realization that fighting back wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. When Neil got home that evening, Penny was waiting in the living room, her sharp eyes immediately landing on his freshly polished nails. She raised an eyebrow and smiled faintly, clearly intrigued. Well, she said, folding her arms. "Your nails look very nice. I have to say, I'm surprised. Why the sudden upgrade?" Neil hesitated, still unsure how to navigate the increasingly bizarre dynamic between them. He raised his hands slightly, showing off the glossy finish Evelyn had so enthusiastically applied. Evelyn did them, he admitted. She thought it might. "I don't know, send a message." Penny tilted her head, studying him. "A message? And what exactly is that message, Neil?" He sighed, sitting down on the edge of the couch and setting his purse beside him. "I guess I wanted to show you that I can play along. Maybe if you see that I don't care what you do, you'll stop." Penny laughed softly, shaking her head. "Oh, Neil, you think this asterisk will make me stop. If anything, it shows me that you're starting to understand. Maybe not completely, but enough to realize this isn't just about wearing a dress. It's about perspective." Neil ran a hand through his wig, the ribbon still tied neatly in place. "Look, Penny, I've been thinking a lot today about what you've been saying. I'll admit that maybe I've been a little harsh in my views about women. Maybe I've said things I shouldn't have." Penny's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "Well, that's a start. Go on." "I'm not saying I agree with all of this," he continued, gesturing vaguely at his outfit, "but I've realized I need to tone it down. I need to be more respectful. Maybe if I show you that, you'll ease up on me." Penny leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "I appreciate the honesty, Neil. But actions speak louder than words. It's easy to say you'll change, but it's harder to show it. Do you really understand how your words and actions have affected the people around you?" Neil nodded slowly, thinking of Evelyn and the heartfelt conversation they'd shared that morning. I do. I spoke to Evelyn today, and she made me realize I've been blind to what others are going through. I blamed her for mistakes without knowing what was really going on in her life. That's on me. Penny smiled faintly, a hint of approval in her eyes. Good. It sounds like you're starting to get it. But remember, this isn't just about Evelyn or me, it's about how you see women as a whole. That change isn't going to happen overnight. Neil sighed. I know, but I'm trying, Penny. I really am. Penny nodded, her tone softening slightly. That's all I wanted from the beginning, Neil. For you to try. To see things differently, even if it makes you uncomfortable. That's where growth happens. Neil glanced at his nails, the shine catching the light. So, what now? Do we keep doing this? Or are you ready to call it quits on the whole dress thing? Penny's smile widened, playful but with a hint of mystery. Let's see how tomorrow goes, shall we? For now, why don't you help me set the table for dinner? And yes, she added with a teasing glint in her eye, you can keep your heels on. Neil groaned but stood up, his heels clicking against the hardwood floor as he made his way to the kitchen. Despite himself, he couldn't help but feel a small measure of relief. Maybe, just maybe, they were starting to turn a corner. As they sat at the table, Penny looked at Neil with a glint of curiosity. What made you decide to get your nails polished? She asked. Neil shrugged and replied, it was Evelyn's idea. She thought it would make me look nicer, so she offered to do them for me. She's more talented than I gave her credit for. He paused, then added, did I tell you her father has cancer? Penny raised an eyebrow. No, you didn't. How did that come up? Neil leaned back slightly. Well, we had a long talk about her work. She explained that after she leaves the office, she goes straight to take care of her father. It's exhausting for her, and she's struggling to concentrate during the day. I told her if she needed anything, like a day off or some support, to let me know. She's really not a bad person, she's just dealing with a lot right now. Penny nodded, a small smile on her face. I'm glad to hear you're seeing her in a better light. I've always liked Evelyn, and I hated how you'd criticize her so often. Honestly, Neil admitted, I never thought to ask what might be going on in her life. But the last couple of days, she's surprised me with how open she's been. I'm going to follow up and see how her father is doing. Penny smiled wider. It sounds like you're finally starting to listen and understand people a little better. That's progress. Oh, I almost forgot, Penny said as they finished their meal. Agatha is coming over tonight for a visit. Would you mind doing the dishes alone? Neil didn't hesitate. No, I don't mind. But I want to change into something more comfortable first. Maybe that blue dress. Penny chuckled. Sure, and you can wear my blue bedroom slippers. They're stretched out enough, I think they'll fit you. After dinner, Neil changed into the blue dress and slippers, tied on his apron, and got to work on the dishes. When he finished, he announced, the dishes are all done. Penny glanced at the kitchen floor and sighed. Would you mind doing the kitchen floor too? It really needs cleaning. Neil nodded. I don't mind. He swept the floor meticulously and then looked for the mop, only to find it missing. When he asked Penny about it, she remembered she'd thrown it out because it was worn out and hadn't replaced it yet. Would you mind doing it on your hands and knees? She asked. Without complaint, Neil grabbed a bucket and a rag and got to work scrubbing. Agatha arrived shortly after and, upon learning what Neil was up to, couldn't resist a peek. I just have to see this, she said, laughing as she walked into the kitchen. There was Neil, on his hands and knees, diligently scrubbing the floor in his blue dress. He didn't notice her until she said, well, if it isn't Mr. Macho, or shall I say, Cecil scrubbing the floor in a dress, no less. Startled, Neil turned his head, his cheeks flushing. I'm just helping Penny, he muttered. She wanted the floor cleaned. Agatha laughed, clearly enjoying the sight. Well, you're doing a fantastic job. You can come over and do mine anytime. With a chuckle, she left the kitchen to rejoin Penny in the living room. The two women chatted while Neil finished scrubbing the floor to a gleaming shine. When he was done, he walked past the doorway quietly, heading to another part of the house. Penny smiled, noting his calm demeanor. After Agatha left, Penny went to inspect the kitchen floor and was delighted to see it sparkling. She called Neil into the living room, motioning for him to sit next to her. He arrived with a drink in hand and settled onto the couch. "You've surprised me tonight," Penny said, her tone warm. "You haven't raised your voice once since you got home." Neil gave a small smile. "I'm trying, Penny. I really am." Penny nodded, her expression softening. "I can see that, and I appreciate it." For the first time in a long while, the air between them felt less tense, as if they were finally finding some common ground. As Neil settled onto the couch beside Penny, he leaned back and exhaled deeply. "Well, maybe I finally realized raising my voice doesn't solve anything. But I do have one question, and I'd like your opinion on it." Penny tilted her head, intrigued. "What's that?" He hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Do you think that maroon-colored dress is appropriate for work tomorrow, or does it have too much lace?" Penny smiled, a mix of amusement and approval in her eyes. "It could work as a professional outfit. It's a bit fancier than most work dresses, but still suitable. What I'd like to know is this. Have your thoughts about women changed?" Neil nodded thoughtfully. "I hate to admit it, but yeah, they have. I used to think women had it easy, but after these past few days, I've realized how much strength it takes. Wearing heels all day, keeping makeup intact, and dealing with so much pressure, it's a lot. I used to see women as the weaker sex, but now I think they're stronger in ways I never gave them credit for. Does that make sense?" Penny's expression softened, her smile growing warmer. "Yes, it makes perfect sense. You're finally starting to sound like the man I married and fell in love with. And you know what? Tomorrow you can wear your regular suit to work if you'd like. I think you've learned the lesson I wanted you to learn." Neil looked at her with genuine gratitude. "Thank you, Penny. I really appreciate that. I'm sorry it took all of this for me to see things differently." Penny's playful tone returned. "So, how did you really feel about wearing a dress?" He chuckled. "Honestly, at first it was humiliating, but after a while, I kind of liked it, the airy, light feeling of it. But the high heels, those can go. They're pure torture. What are you going to do with the dresses I didn't wear?" She grinned. "What do you suggest we do with them?" Neil shrugged. "Well, I could wear them occasionally. No sense letting them go to waste." Penny laughed softly. "And don't forget, you never wore the corsets I bought. Maybe we should see what they do for your figure." He groaned but laughed along with her. "Oh, sure, because I haven't suffered enough. You just want to torture me in a new way." Their shared laughter filled the room, the tension from the past few days finally easing. Then Neil glanced at his polished nails and asked, "By the way, how do you get this stuff off? I don't think I can show up to work like this." Penny looked sheepish. "I wouldn't know. I don't wear nail polish, so we don't have any remover in the house." Neil chuckled. "Well, I guess I might as well wear the maroon dress tomorrow then. Maybe you can pick up some remover while I'm at work." Penny nodded, her grin widening. "Deal." The next morning, Neil emerged from the bedroom wearing the maroon dress. Penny smiled approvingly. "You look fantastic in that dress," she said, giving him a quick kiss. Neil kissed her back, then paused. "Guess I need to redo my lipstick now, huh?" They both laughed as he headed to the mirror, dabbing on a fresh coat. When they left for work, there was a sense of accomplishment on both sides. Penny felt she had succeeded in opening Neil's eyes, and Neil, though still adjusting, felt proud of the growth he'd achieved. At the office, Neil found Evelyn waiting with her usual morning coffee. He smiled broadly. "Good news," he said, setting his purse down. "My days in a dress are officially over." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? And what brought this about?" Neil launched into a detailed recounting of the previous night, including Penny's change of heart and their mutual understanding. Evelyn listened with genuine surprise. When he finished, she gave him an amused smile. As if on impulse, Neil stood, walked over to her, and kissed her lightly on the cheek. "Thank you," he said simply. Evelyn blinked, then burst out laughing. "You're welcome, Neil, or should I say Cecil. I never thought I'd see the day. Neil laughed too, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. Neither did I, he admitted, but here we are. That evening, as Penny carefully removed the polish from Neil's nails, the warm glow of the bedside lamp cast a soft light over their faces. Neil watched her with a mix of gratitude and reflection. He broke the silence with a quiet, heartfelt voice. "I want to thank you for everything you did, Penny," he said. "I didn't see it at first, your reasoning, your point. I fought you because I didn't understand. But now I do. When it clicked, it all seemed so simple. I'm sorry it had to come to all of this. I should have listened to you from the start." Penny paused, glancing up at him with a gentle smile. "That's all right, Neil. In a strange way, it was fun for me. I knew you'd resist, it's just who you are, but I also knew you'd come around eventually. I couldn't let you keep going the way you were, not when I knew you could be better. And now you are. That's what matters." Neil took her free hand, his fingers curling around hers. "I'm glad it's over too. I've learned more from this than I thought I could, and I don't want to lose the man I've become or the wife who helped me get here." Penny's smile softened, her eyes shimmering with emotion. She leaned closer, pressing a gentle kiss to his lips. It was a kiss full of understanding, forgiveness, and love, the kind of kiss that rekindles something deep and enduring. Later, as they walked hand in hand to the bedroom, an unspoken peace settled between them. Penny felt a deep sense of contentment, knowing her husband had finally understood her, not just as a woman, but as his equal partner. Neil, in turn, felt the quiet joy of having someone who loved him enough to challenge him, to push him to be better. As they lay side by side in bed, Penny rested her head on his shoulder. "I miss this," she whispered. "Us." Neil kissed the top of her head, his arm pulling her closer. "So did I, and I'm not going to take it for granted again." The night passed quietly, their hands entwined under the covers. By morning, the air between them felt lighter, as though they'd crossed an invisible bridge together. From that day forward, they moved as a team, one built on mutual respect, deeper understanding, and the kind of love that grows stronger with every challenge overcome. Penny had her loving husband back, and Neil knew he'd gained something priceless in return: a greater appreciation for the woman he loved and a better version of himself.